All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everyone is feeling refreshed and hope everyone was able to stay relatively cool. I know I walked down to the grocery store on lunch, and up here in Indianapolis, it is extremely hot and humid right now. So I hope everyone is able to stay comfortable today. So we are going to jump back in. I do not think that I have 3 hours worth of material left for today, so we are going to be getting out of here a bit early. Sorry if that breaks anyone's heart, but hopefully that works out for all of you. Um, so yeah, the recording is going, just so you know, and I am going to jump back into it. I'm going to ease us back in to the material with customer service. So it's going to be a pretty soft category here. And I'll be honest, a lot of this is kind of repeat of what we've done in previous years. So I don't intend to dwell on it or take too long with it. Just going to kind of gloss over a brief high-level overview of customer service here. So we're going to be talking about customer service basics, some customer communications tips, and best practices. Now, I do understand that most of you have been doing this for a long time. You work with clients daily, and this may be a review for you. However, we do believe that no matter how long you've worked in customer service, there's always something new you can learn, always a different way you can look at things. And it's helpful to have a refresher on concepts that you might have forgotten. So just some basics. When it comes to interacting with e-clients, please try to remember to be aware and sensitive to a customer's fragile emotional state or financial situation. Be compassionate and kind without crossing a line. Maintain a united front with ICDA and your LSP colleagues. Offer other possibilities for help when applicable. And if you don't know something, just admit that, and it's okay to ask for help when you need it. We do require everyone to have a public-facing email inbox where applicants can send questions, requests for information, and other correspondence. This email address must be entered into EAP Connect so that populates onto the client notices. When customers first reach out, they may be reaching out during an emotional or financial crisis. So, there's a number of things that may be going on with their situation. They may find it impossible to afford basics like rent, utilities, groceries, hygiene products, etc. There may be an unexpected expense, medical emergency, car repairs, that could be putting them at risk of homelessness. Um, they may be relying on other resources, other government programs, food pantries, food banks, diaper banks, etc. And they might find they're not being treated with dignity and respect by those employees and volunteers, and they might project that onto you, expecting the same kind of expecting that you're going to treat them in that same way. And as a result, that may show in the way they interact with you. They may feel like there's a power imbalance between you and them, which is unfair, unjust, maybe to their detriment. Um, they may be scared and anxious because this program, and by extension you, are their last hope. They may be pressed for time because of work obligations, family obligations, appointments with other programs or services. It may be that they've already spent a lot of time, energy, and patience on multiple applications and intake appointments with other programs. Everything, especially here where we know in the state of Indiana, like a lot of these programs are siloed under different agencies, and so we're not able to have a unified application the way some other states do. Um, this can all feel very burdensome. It can feel like unnecessary hoops that they don't, that some of the applicants, don't necessarily understand. To them, it's the different funding sources doesn't change the fact that this is just assistance that they need. So it starts to feel like unnecessary hoops they must jump through just to meet their basic needs. Um, And frequently, there's a stigma around public assistance, right? So they may be feeling ashamed or embarrassed because they need to ask for this help. And don't forget, there can also be other barriers preventing them from understanding how to navigate the program. Um, limited literacy skills, limited English proficiency, limited technology skills, etc. So when you're communicating with applicants, trying to keep that kindness and compassion central in how you interact with them is vital. Um, even if you have to correct the applicant on something, or um, or ask for something that they are not willing to give, if you can kind of practice kind and compassionate ways to ask for those things, that can really go a long way. Um, and first step maybe is to just to listen to them and let them know that they are being heard. Often a customer just wants to be heard and feel that they're being heard. They want you to hear their story. That story might include details about negative experiences with getting assistance in the past, maybe a recent job loss, a medical emergency, miscommunication with their utility company or with another authority figure. Um, so, listen without letting the applicant hijack your day. You shouldn't spend 30 minutes letting them either just ramble or even worse, kind of spiral into a rage and egg themselves on. Um, if you can engage in some active listening, paraphrasing back to them the parts of their story that are relevant to the program, it helps them know that you're really listening. And it will also kind of, if they're starting to stray off course, it will help to refocus the conversation on the reason why they are here with you and what you can do for them. Um, and also, it might just help them to be more receptive to whatever information you are able to provide. That being said, there are a number of things that we need to avoid when we're communicating with applicants. Um, Probably chief among these things that we need to avoid is any guarantee, either explicit or implicit, of a positive outcome or of actually receiving assistance. We need to remember that we are taking an application, that this is an income-based program, and that until we actually scrutinize the documentation, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we need to avoid um, giving even the appearance of offering a guarantee of service here. Um, so things to avoid saying are things like, if you apply for EAP, you'll probably get your whole bill paid off. They'll get your lights back on today. And those are things that are, so as far as restoration day of, that is something that is way outside of our control. Um, and any guarantee that the whole bill will be paid off, even with that word probably there, until we run it through a matrix, we don't know what the benefit's going to be. Our program is not set up to be to be a program that pays people's bills. Um, you know, the word assistance is in there very intentionally. So we are providing assistance, but that doesn't mean that we are going to be able to pay off entire bills necessarily. Um, and another thing to avoid saying is something like, I know you're eligible, you just need to apply. Um, even if you're speaking off the record, that can come off as a guarantee and can be very premature. Um, Try to avoid using technical jargon or pretentious wording. Um, try to avoid saying something like the LSP handles the transmittals to utility vendors. You can let them know that you communicated with, you know, whatever the company is, whether it's Duke or Centerpoint or NIPSCO, and just let them know I talk to them. I let them know that you're approved and how much you're approved for. Um, they it's not necessary that we are trying to hide the process from the applicant, but the applicant has so many concerns that are more central to them that they need to um, they need to tackle. They don't need to also concern themselves um, with kind of all the behind the curtain goings on. What matters to them is, were they approved? How much were they approved for? And was the vendor notified? Um, and then another thing to avoid when you're communicating with the applicants is something like, due to your failure to comply with program policy, your application was denied. Ergo, you will have to reapply. Um, if you're writing an appeal response, that's one thing. But if you're just talking with an applicant, just try to be more natural and accessible in your language. Please don't try to throw either staff either at your own agency or a different agency or at ICDA under the bus. Remember that we are a united front. We are a team, and honestly, any issues at any level will impact everyone else who's a part of the team. So please just try to remember that. Um, and we are human. I often on our meetings, like I will admit when I made a bad call or when I dropped a ball on something. We do make mistakes. We can't hold ourselves or each other to unrealistic standards. So instead of dwelling on any finger pointing, we need to focus on what we can do to fix situations when they happen. Um, Also, try to avoid adding your own personal commentary. We are here to provide assistance and to determine eligibility and not to pass any kind of judgment. So things like, your family deserves this because you actually work. They should move your application to the top of the stack. Or conversely, it's only $50. What does it matter to you? Um, we don't want to we don't want to express our own add our own values to the narrative. When you are communicating with applicants, offer other possibilities for help when applicable, providing referrals, other avenues that can help them achieve a better quality of life and provide plan B in case they're being denied by another program. Those can be other ICDA programs like weatherization, um, any other programs or services with the Community Action Agency, the Township Trustee, any resources that 211 is available to provide, and any vendor-specific assistance programs that may exist. This does need to be done with a delicate touch, so it doesn't seem like you're trying to just get rid of them. So if they don't seem like they're open to those options, don't force it. We just need to document that they were offered. And admit when there's something that you don't know. Again, we are all human. None of us is omniscient here. Ask for help when you need it. It's totally acceptable to tell a customer, I need to confer with my team about this. I'll call you back. Or let me look into this a little bit more and tell them when you'll have the answer by. We are a team, so reach out for help. Just make sure if you're quoting a time that you're going to get back to them, make sure that you follow up with them. Even if you don't have the answer, follow up, just to let them know you need a little bit more time, but you're working on it. It does also show the customer that you want to spend time on their concern or question and that you are committed to doing it correctly. Remember to practice self-care and to get support if you have any troubling or concerning interactions. So don't just be kind to customers. You need to be kind to yourself as well. And if a customer writes or says something that is concerning or troubling to you, you do need to share that information with your manager or supervisor. Um, if the applicant is harassing or threatening you or someone on your team, if you have any suspicion of fraud, if you have a mental health concern, if you have a concern there might be some abuse or neglect going on, or any other unsafe conditions. It's very important those uh, are communicated and are addressed in a proper way. All right, so we're going to go over a little bit more detail on just these four categories of the tips for communications. And the first one is timing. Um, so communicate within standard business hours. Um, Make sure your voicemail inbox is cleared out for customers to be able to leave a voicemail, and try to make yourselves available as best you can for customers. Be sure to provide some sort of response, even if it's just an acknowledgement, within 24 to 96 hours when possible. When responding to voicemails, emails, or phone calls where you had to get additional information, call back. Try to make sure you call after 9 a.m. at the earliest to avoid waking the household. Um, and you can adjust that as your comfort level as your comfort level allows. So I usually try not to call anyone before 10 a.m. Just to be extra safe. Um, and make sure you have time for a lengthy call and are ready to be passionate or I'm sorry, patient and compassionate before you dial. So if you know you only have 5 or 10 minutes, and it's an issue that's probably going to need more conversation than that, it's probably best that you reschedule the call rather than try to squeeze it all into 5 or 10 minutes and potentially cut the customer off from asking any follow-ups. Next tip is consistency. For your written communications, we strongly recommend using templates. Templates will ensure that you don't forget important information. They'll provide consistency in some of the verbiage and tone. It'll help you save some time, and you can always add any personal touches that might be appropriate as needed. We also suggest using scripts for some of your phone calls. You can use the templates that you have for your written communications to guide phone calls for the same reasons, or you can just prepare notes for yourself to refer to make sure you're staying on message when dealing with a unique situation. However, make sure that when you're using these scripts that you do leave space to respond in your own voice to what the customer is saying. You don't want to just read the script back to the customer. You want to be able to respond to what they're actually saying and to sound genuine. We do suggest bookending the conversation with a friendly greeting and a friendly closing. Here are just some examples. However, do be mindful about those. If they're being denied or just got disconnected by their utility company and you are not delivering good news, you probably don't want to close with something like "Have a great day." You want to tailor what you're using to the specifics of the situation. Otherwise, it can really come off as insensitive. Something better in that situation would probably be something along the lines of, take care. I hope your day gets better. I hope the resources I'm providing are helpful for solving your problem, etc. Educate your applicants. So if an applicant completes a form incorrectly, but it is clear that they are trying to do it correctly, instead of just telling them it's wrong, please explain to them what is incorrect about it and exactly what you need from them in order to be able to determine their eligibility. So, for example, when you're sending letters requesting additional information, um, please don't just put return these documents to us. Make sure you have a return mailing address, a return email address, any other contact information on how to return it. And you may also want to, if they've already tried to complete this and they complete it incorrectly, please also consider putting in there exactly what was incorrect about their first submission, because otherwise they're likely to just fill out the exact same way they did the first time. And it's just frustrating for everyone involved. Make sure your EAP webpage is both up to date and accurate, and ensure that all the appropriate documents are up to date. Please remember that you are the primary point of contact for applicants. Um, please do not refer applicants to call us directly. When we get those phone calls, most of the time we are going to be referring those applicants back to you. That will lead to frustration for the applicant, and it could escalate the situation. Um, that's not to say that there's not times where escalation to ICDA is not needed. It absolutely is necessary sometimes. But when that escalation is necessary, that escalation should be made by the LSP, not by the applicant. And there are a few reasons for that. I think I've talked I know I've talked before several times about how um, we've quite simply are not staffed to be able to be a primary point of contact for over 100,000 applicants. And in addition, um, a lot of times, what is needed from ICDA, if it does require that escalation to ICDA, then there's something that is needing to be done that's at a higher level than what you were able to do at the local agency. And frankly, because we are not a primary point of contact for the applicant, usually if there's something that we need to do, it's so far out of the applicant's frame of reference that they don't even know how to ask for what they need. And so you're going to be able to convey that to us much more effectively and efficiently. Right. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I am looking at the chat. Um, okay, Laura, I see that I missed one from you just before we went to lunch. We had many complaints from clients that they were unable to upload documents to the online portal. Some were probably user error, but I feel like many were legit. Yeah, whenever you see those or get those complaints, um, feel free to let us know, but you can also feel free to report that as a ticket to rowing, so that they can look on their end and see if there is anything that's stopping those uploads from going through. Um, Brad, I wish we had both a summer program and sufficient funding for a summer program. Um, And Ingrid is adding that she also thinks it's important that if we make a mistake, we own that and apologize for it and then make it right as soon as we can. And Ingrid, I absolutely, I absolutely agree. I know that the applicants want us to be infallible, and uh, I maybe err too much on the other side. I maybe err too much on the side of uh, being very transparent with applicants of just how human and fallible I am, but I also don't want them to have unrealistic expectations of my ability to do of my ability to do things for them. Just because if they have unrealistic expectations, they can sometimes I've had it happen where they've depended on that. Well, you know, Tom was able to make this happen before, so he'll be able to do it again. Um, yeah, we We're not superheroes, and we can't do it all. We can try as we might to do as much as we can, but we can't do it all. All right. Any other clarification questions, comments, best practices, concerns um, before we roll into household eligibility? All right. Hearing none, I am going to move into household eligibility next. So, as part of household eligibility, we will be looking at the difference between household eligibility and benefit eligibility, determination dates, dates in EAP Connect, household eligibility review, and common errors. So the first thing here is understanding the difference between household eligibility and benefit eligibility. So if a household has a circumstance that's preventing the awarding of a benefit, and that can be something like inoperable equipment, an outstanding deposit on the account, um, an excess credit balance, etc., uh, this does not impact the determination of overall household eligibility. So, staff must take care to distinguish between household eligibility and benefit eligibility. And some, for the term for household eligibility, when we're talking during the program year about this issue, we sometimes use the term programmatic eligibility. So I just want everyone to remember that household eligibility and programmatic eligibility mean the same thing. So that those two terms can be used interchangeably. So household or programmatic eligibility may be used to determine eligibility for other resources. And it also qualifies households for moratorium protection regardless of whether they are receiving a benefit. So when a household resolves any issues preventing benefit payment, um, that household eligibility must not be redetermined. Once we make a determination on the household eligibility, that household eligibility will follow that applicant for the rest of the federal fiscal year. Households also must not be denied on the basis of submitting utility bill documentation, since the utility bill documentation only helps determine their benefit eligibility, not their actual household or programmatic eligibility. Determination dates. So the LSP must make a timely and accurate determination of the household's eligibility for benefits within the following timeline. For any in-person appointments, in-person or virtual appointments, that determination shall be made within 14 calendar days of the application's completion. And for mail-ins, and remember, for the purposes of our policy, mail-in does include any application that's dropped off in the office. It includes any telephonic application, includes any online application. Those applications should be determined within 55 days of the date that you received the application in your office. And that time frame does start November 1st. So for any applications received prior to November 1st, we are going to be looking at 55 days from November 1st, which would be December 26th. And this does relate back to one of the assurances. That assurance is Assurance 5. Assurance 5 dictates that we provide in a timely manner that the highest level of assistance will be furnished to those households which have the lowest incomes and the highest energy costs or needs in relation to income, taking into account family size, and then it goes on from there. I will share with you that we've had some discussions with one of our previous HHS uh, regional liaisons, and when she asked about our timelines, and we gave her the information, she didn't flat out tell us that we weren't meeting HHS expectations, but she questioned whether 55 days really met the timeliness uh, requirement of Assurance 5. Um, so to be perfectly transparent, I think I've said this to all of you several years ago, pre-pandemic, that when we went from 60 to 55 days, the intention was to continue to walk that down. Obviously, we had a pandemic happen in there, and we have not moved that from 55 days since. Um, I think it's important that we're transparent that the ultimate goal here is to walk that back from 55 days and to begin being able to determine eligibility in a shorter time frame. Um, but I want to be sure that we are offering you the support that you need in order to be able to do that confidently and without, breaking your backs. So I think the technology changes that we're going to be having is going to be part of that. Um, Internally, I can tell you we're having um, a lot of conversations about where can we remove burden, where can we remove steps, can we increase efficiency. And all of that, I think, is going to support us being able to help you to get those applications done in a quicker time frame. But we do want to be sure that that support is in place before we begin walking that back. So I just wanted to address that real quickly, just because I know it's been at 55 days for several years now, and I know that's been a point of discussion at times when we've been talking about policy and policy changes. Um, and just to remind you that does come back to one of those assurances. So our dates, the received date is the date an application is received by the LSP. We also refer to that as the application date. Uh, we are asking LSPs for any hard copy documents that you receive that you date stamp those mail applications when they are received so that we know unambiguously what the application date is. We are going to go off of that date stamp date, the date that you actually got that application in the mail, as opposed to going off of the date that the applicant signs it. Um, Frankly, if we go off the date that the applicant signs it, that can be unfair to you because it may have just spent 3 to 5 days in the mail. It might have come in on a Friday afternoon and it doesn't get open until Monday. Um, that applicant might have signed it and then sat on it for a month before turning it into you. So I know there has been some confusion in the past where it's gotten back to me that some staff might be using the date the applicant signed the application as the application date. And I want to be very unambiguous here that we are intending for that to be the date that someone at the agency has that application in their hands. These applications should be processed on a first received, first served basis, crisis notwithstanding. So the dates need connect, as I just said, the application date is the same as the application received date. It's going to be the date that you stamped that application as having been physically received. The application entered date is the date that the application was actually entered into the statewide database. That application entered date is going to be auto-generated when you create that application. It will not be able to be altered or edited. And the application completed date is the date that you had all the information that you needed in order to be able to determine programmatic or household eligibility. Um, if you're putting a claim into the system, that completion date will need to be uh, will need to be populated. You will not be able to enter a claim if you do not have an application completion date because uh, an application cannot be approved if it's not complete. So when conducting that household eligibility review, intake is consider only factors that contribute to programmatic eligibility. And these factors are the Indiana residency, characteristics of the dwelling, the composition of the household, and the income of the household. If any documentation related to any of that information is missing, um, then that means that intake is prevented from being able to accurately determine eligibility, and that application must be marked as incomplete, and an incomplete letter is to be sent to the applicant. If other information is missing, but it's not the applicant's responsibility to provide it, so examples of that would be, say the applicant receives unemployment and you've sent off a Department of Workforce Development last known employer request, and you are waiting on Department of Workforce Development to return the results of that request. That would not be incomplete because it's not the applicant's responsibility to provide that to you. So you should be placing that application into in progress status rather than incomplete. And just wanted to go over some common errors that we've seen in monitoring related to the income, or sorry, the programmatic or household eligibility as opposed to benefit eligibility. So intake should be aware of conflating household eligibility determination with that benefit eligibility determination. So things that we've seen with this have been conflating, or sorry, marking the household incomplete for missing utility bills, or for denying a household that meets programmatic eligibility requirements, but denying them for failure to submit utility bills or for an excessive credit balance. Also, failing to deny an application when documentation is not received by the due date on the incomplete letter. We have seen from time to time agencies allow extra time or sometimes leave that application in incomplete status indefinitely. It's unfortunate, but one of the things that we have seen in the past is sometimes applicants don't necessarily take the incomplete letter seriously, and sometimes you need that threat of your application has been denied and that denial is going to become permanent in order for them to actually follow through and provide the documentation. So you're actually doing everyone a disservice if you don't stick to that timeline that was established of here's the due date and we need everything back by that due date. Uh, Failure to follow up with a household to determine if a member marked as disabled but does not receive an SSA administered benefit has documentation that they meet our definition of disabled. So I know that's kind of a mouthful there, but basically, as hopefully everyone on the call knows, if someone marks themselves as disabled, or if someone of a household member is marked as disabled by the head of household who's applying, we do look to see if they have an SSA benefit, SSA administered benefit, to ensure that they meet our definition of disabled. If they don't have that, what we want to do is actually request. Ask if they should have had, if they forgot to submit that. But if they don't actually receive any SSA benefits, then we do have um, the disability uh, confirmation form. I forget the exact title of the form. But we do have that, and we want to follow up with that and get that within 14 days. However, I've also seen people be denied for incomplete because they did not return that form. And I do want to be clear that if someone doesn't provide evidence showing that they meet the definition of a disabled person, we don't want to deny the household over that. If we don't get that back, we should be actually just not marking that person as disabled, and then we should continue with our eligibility determination. But by that same token, if someone marks themselves as disabled and they don't appear to meet the definition, we do want to give them the opportunity to provide that documentation. So we really kind of want to walk that line of giving them the opportunity without also penalizing them too much for it. Also using incomplete or inappropriate income or utility documentation, including accepting an IVA for earned income without documented attempts to obtain the independent documentation of income. As I said earlier, this policy might be shifting a bit depending on where we land with things around the IVA. So we will be touching base on that later in the coming month or two. And another common error we've seen is marking an application as incomplete when waiting on information from a vendor or from the Department of Workforce Development. Okay, and that brings us up. We are about to go into the income eligibility determination and calculation training. Do we have any questions before I jump into that? Brad.
So yeah, so on a DWD, if we're not getting the correct documentation from the client, we would incomplete the application and send them the DWD form to complete to get back to submit to DWD. Because they have to sign that form.
Right. So it's more like so when I said like you shouldn't do it if you're waiting on information from DWD. So if you got the form and you submitted it and you're just waiting on DWD to send the results back, that would not be an incomplete. But if you need the actual authorization from the applicant still, that's absolutely an incomplete.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify on that because I didn't. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. Okay.
No, that's a really good, it's one of those finer points, but that's a really good point to bring up that, so just to reiterate, it's only, what I said about not being a reason for incomplete was only when you're waiting on the agency, not on the applicant. If you're waiting on the applicant for anything, it's absolutely an incomplete at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Angela.
Go ahead. Okay, my question is about disability. So if a client clearly sees the Social Security disability income, but marks in their application that they're not, and they always have received it, and we mark it as disabled, as we have, which way should I go? We would go this year to not mark them as disabled.
So, Angela, I am getting a horrible amount of feedback and echo. I caught a few words in there, but I'll be honest, I did not catch the gist of it.
Okay, just a second, I'm going to type it out.
Yeah, if you could type it in the chat, that would be helpful. All right, so while they're typing that, I do see Tashara has something in the chat asking me to go over disability again. So if an applicant household member is marked as disabled, we the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look to see if it meets the definition of disabled. And for us, the definition of disabled is basically is, are they actually receiving, have they been acknowledged as disabled by SSA, by the Social Security Administration, and are they receiving some kind of benefit from SSA to show that they are disabled? So that would be, most likely either SSDI, Social Security disability insurance, or SSI, supplemental security income. If someone marks themselves as disabled and they are not receiving one of those SSA administered benefits, then first step usually is to say, hey, we see that this person is marked as disabled. We don't have any record of them receiving SSA benefits. Do they receive any SSDI or SSI? If the answer to that is no, there's still a possibility that they might be able to meet our definition of disabled if it can be confirmed that they are at least going through the process of trying to get those benefits. So in that case, we have a disability documentation form that must be completed and signed by a medical professional. So in order to keep with HIPAA, it does not actually list any diagnosis. We don't have the medical professional put any diagnosis on it. But what they do is they just sign an affidavit of confirming that they that person is under their care and that person has a disabling condition. So the doctor or medical professional fills that out, signs it, and then you're going to include that in the file along with some sort of proof that the applicant household member either has an active application in with Social Security Administration for disability, or has an appeal in for denial from SSA. If someone is claiming to be disabled and they are not able to provide either the SSA benefits or that documentation that they have been determined to be disabled by a medical professional and that they're applying for those benefits, we are not going to be able to count them as a vulnerable population. We have seen where in response to that, people have submitted proof that they are receiving short-term disability from their employer. That is not going to count as disabled for the purposes of the eligibility determination for our program. All right. Okay, so Angela's question is, if a client receives SSDI but marks themselves as not disabled, but they clearly do receive it, we continue to mark them as disabled, but we're told not to correct the client. Is this correct? I'd have to look into it. I think there might be cases where the child of a disabled person might actually receive something from SSDI possibly, or it might be a survivor of someone. I would need to double check on that, Angela, but I will definitely look into that and we'll let you know, okay?
I was trying back yet.
Okay, can you hear me?
It's better now, yes.
Okay. They are not, they're not a child. They are
Okay.
an adult. And on his application, he refuses to mark that he is disabled. But
Gotcha.
all of his documentation showed that he is disabled. So we marked him as disabled on the application. But when we did our audit, we were told not to mark it because he did not mark it on his application.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have an internal discussion about that, and we'll get back to you on that for sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Ingrid is adding that we were told to mark them disabled if the letter from SSA states DI in the upper right-hand corner during monitoring, even if they mark themselves not disabled. Yeah, so yeah, Ingrid and Angela, I'll be sure to talk both with the rest of the program team as well as monitoring, and we will get to a consensus on that and issue guidance to make sure that we are telling everyone something consistent there. Yeah, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Laura.
Yeah, I was wondering if we've sent out the request for earnings statement to the employer and we're waiting the 14 days, would the status of the application also be in progress?
Yeah, I think if you've gotten everything you need to from the applicant, because the incomplete like implies if you don't get something from that applicant within 14 days that they're going to be denied. At that point, if you've gotten everything from the applicant and you're just waiting on something that's not going to be held against them, I think it should be in progress.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Tashara.
Hi, Thomas. So I have a quick question. So if a client come in and they apply for the program and they're at the age of 63 and they're stating that they are not receiving benefits, is it okay to ask them to go to the Social Security office to get something stating that they're not receiving benefits or no?
I think if you have reason to believe that they may be receiving it, I think our policies and the certification statements we have them sign will allow you to do that. But I don't think it should be a routine thing. I think it should be if you have reason to believe that they are being non-compliant to it. You know, we don't want to start putting a whole lot of burdens and roadblocks in front of everyone routinely. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if they fill out the IVA correctly, so we won't have to ask for nothing from the Social Security office and don't have to do a DWD on them as well, as long as that IVA is filled out correctly.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're trying to reduce the paperwork burdens where we can.
Is it only for disability?
All right. Anything else before we move forward? All right. We have one more section left for today. So I do want to confirm that we will definitely be ending before 4 o'clock. I'm going to take us through a few slides here. Sorry. I'm going to take us through a few slides here. After we get to the first Slido break, we will go ahead and take another 10 or 15-minute break, be able to stretch our legs, and then we will come back and finish it off after that. So let's jump into the eligibility determination and calculation portion of the training. So we're going to be talking about income eligibility determination calculation. That includes the income calculation, the income eligibility, the eligibility determination, what tools we use, the documentation and examples of income documentation. And then we are going to go through the different sources of income. So we are continuing with the same model that we have had for the past several years. We are going to be based on 60% of state median income only. We are not adopting the hybrid in which we switch over to 150% of federal poverty guidelines once it outpaces the SMI. Up on the screen, you see the most recent SMI for a household of four is $107,555. And so up on the screen, this is the chart for what our 60% SMI eligibility guidelines are. So once again, we are sticking just with 60% SMI. And when determining a household's income, the eligibility period shall be defined as the immediate 13 weeks preceding the date of application. As a reminder, we are trying to reduce the amount of burden that we're placing on applicants, the amount of paperwork that they're required to retrieve or to turn in. And so if we find that agencies are routinely requesting 3 complete months or 13 complete weeks of documentation from the applicant household members, that will result in monitoring findings. That's not to say there aren't times where you can request that. If you have reason to believe that an applicant may be non-compliant, especially if you suspect that there may be an attempt to intentionally defraud the program, you do have the authority and you do have the ability, according to the certification statement, to request additional information in order to confirm any statements being made, and that can include requesting additional pay information. But you should only be doing that in cases where you have reason to believe that that the information that you're providing the first time is incorrect or non-representative, and you need to document why you are requesting additional information. So it shouldn't just be something you're routinely requesting of everyone. Once again, we are going to be implementing the Excel workbook for earned income, and we will have the EAP Connect onboard calculator, which fingers crossed that onboard calculator matches my my Excel workbook this year. But of course, as we talked about before, those earned income calculation spreadsheets will help to eliminate mathematical errors. It does provide a clear picture of how that income is being calculated. It ensures consistency. It allows us to determine income based on only a single pay stub. Makes it easy to double check to verify that the income is being entered correctly. It does show the monitor how the calculations were made, which is going to help ease the scrutiny of monitoring, and it ultimately reduces errors in how crisis is calculated. That probably shouldn't say crisis. That was probably mistyping on my part. Reduce errors in how the income is calculated. So if the staff uses the Excel spreadsheet to calculate the income, that spreadsheet should be scanned or saved and uploaded into the client file to show the calculation. A screenshot would also work at that point. In most cases, the manual lists acceptable forms of income for different income sources in the order of preference. Whenever a less preferred form of documentation is accepted, intake shall note in the applicant file why the more preferred forms were unavailable. I do want to be very transparent with everyone at this point. So when we say there are a few policies that are currently being scrutinized and may be tweaked, this whole concept of more preferred versus less preferred forms of income is one that we're currently looking at. So we will let you know in coming weeks if there is a change there. I will let you know that if there is a change there, the change is going to make things easier on you guys. It's going to make those standards of more preferred versus less preferred. It's going to relax them. I think right now we're just looking to see where we think things are going with some of the executive orders coming out of the governor's office, and whether we are able to relax our standards on these at all or not. But for now, this policy does still stand, and the income verification affidavits should only be accepted as a last resort. For employment income, as an example, a request for earnings should be attempted before accepting income verification affidavits. As a reminder, the income and the income calculation period is always calculated based on the date of application, not on the date of the processing or the date of application completion. So that is going to be your application received date, the date of your date stamp, etc. If income documentation is current as of the date of application, intake shall use the documentation submitted as part of the application without requesting updated information. And as a reminder, because we are looking at 13 weeks, and we accept a single pay stub from within that time period, that means that in order for income documentation for earned income to be current, it just has to have been received on the day of the application or any time within the prior 91 days. So, as an example for that, suppose an application is received on December 13th, but the application is not received until February 1st. In that case, the income eligibility period will be determined based on the application date of December 13th. So, in this scenario, suppose the applicant submits a 2-week pay stub and it's dated November 5th. Because November 5th is within 91 days of December 13th, you should be using that November 5th pay stub. You're not going to request a December 3rd pay stub, and you're not going to request a January 28th pay stub. November 5th pay stub is valid because it is within 91 days of the application date. Getting that December 3rd pay stub, even though it would be the most recent, would be redundant at that point. And January 28th, if you were to request that one, it would actually not be a valid check stub since it is actually outside of the eligibility window because it is over a month past the application date. Right. We are at our first Slido quiz. So as promised, we are going to do this first Slido quiz, and then we are going to take about a 15-minute break, be able to stretch our legs, and then get to stop listening to me drone on for a good quarter of an hour, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the day. And it does not seem like this is not working properly. Bear with me for 1 minute. Okay, I got it working now. So everyone should, it looks like everyone is still logged into Slido, but if anyone missed it in the morning, feel free to join Slido either on another tab or on a mobile device. All right, we have 85 people in there, and that looks good for our numbers. So once again, the rules are mark all that apply. It may be more than one valid answer here. Which of these are valid reasons to mark an application incomplete? And your options here are the applicant did not submit a full utility bill. The applicant, sorry, that should say did not submit a full SSA benefit letter. So please be aware that should be did not submit a full SSA benefit letter. The applicant submitted a bank statement with redaction. The applicant submitted a utility bill with a second name on it, but no non-household member declaration form. The applicant submitted a utility bill with a second name on it, but the second name is redacted. The applicant failed to submit a social security card and a photo ID for themselves, or the applicant failed to submit a social security card for a 5-year-old child in the household. Sorry, I know not everyone got their answers in. I thought about giving some more time there, and I probably should have. So we have 10% said the applicant did not submit a full utility bill. 75% said the applicant did not submit a full SSA letter. 97% said the applicant submitted a bank statement with redaction. 80% said the applicant submitted a utility bill with a second name on it, but no non-household member declaration form. 78% said the applicant submitted a utility bill with the second name on it, but the second name is redacted. 7% said the applicant failed to submit a social security card and photo ID for themselves. And looks like maybe 6% or so said the applicant failed to submit a social security card for a 5-year-old child in the household. The correct answers here were the applicant did not submit a full SSA benefit letter, and the applicant submitted a bank statement with redaction. I'm just going to real briefly go over why the other ones are not valid reasons to mark an application incomplete, just for the good of the cause here. 10%. So for the first one, for the applicant not submitting a full utility bill, we do have an agreement with the utility vendors where if the applicant does not submit that full utility bill, if that's the only reason that you're not able to complete the application, we have an agreement with the utility vendors where the utility vendors have all agreed to provide that directly to the agency upon request. So we should not be burdening the applicant with having to provide that when we can get that easily from the vendor. And especially our larger vendors, a lot of them have portals that you can log into where you can actually just download the bill without even having to reach out to a customer service person. The next one, applicant submitted a utility bill with a second name on it, but no non-household member declaration form. So yes, that is something that would be needed if they have a utility bill with a second name on it. However, that is part of the benefit determination and not the household programmatic eligibility determination. And so you would not actually be issuing an incomplete notice for that because you can determine their you can determine that they are either approved or denied. And if you need that non-household member declaration form, you can just let them know we can't release your benefit until we receive that. The next one, the applicant submitted a utility bill with the second name on it, but the second name is redacted. That kind of goes along with the first one, right? So you have redaction on a document that they're not allowed to redact. However, you don't have to get that document directly from the applicant. You can get that from the utility vendor. And if they're a larger vendor, even better, because you can most likely get that through the portal without having to go through the whole rigmarole of having to have a phone conversation and have someone send it over to you. And then if you find out that second name that's redacted is a non-household member, that's when you would say that you can't release the benefit without that non-household member declaration form. Sorry, I know I was being sneaky with some of these, but trying to get you guys thinking critically about this. Applicant fails to submit a social security card and photo ID for themselves. We do not require social security cards or photo IDs any longer since the end of program year 2024. And then the applicant failed to submit a social security card for a 5-year-old child in the household. That also goes along with us no longer requiring social security cards for anyone in the household. Ingrid and then Linda.
So then I understand that it's the utility bill and it's a benefit issue, for that the second name on it. But then what's the best way to request that? Because what if the client just is going to decide I don't know, they won't get it to us until after the season ends.
If they don't want their benefit, that's on them. It's harsh, but we're at least getting them that moratorium protection, and that moratorium protection is going to kick in until the end of the moratorium. But ultimately, I'm going to assume that most people who are applying for this program want the benefit. And they got halfway there, but if they want the rest of that benefit, they're going to have to turn in the form.
And then my other issue is with the second one where they redacted the name. Why did they redact the name?
And that's a good question. That's a good question, right? But ultimately, we can still say, that based on the information that we have here, your household meets programmatic eligibility. Now, of course, if it is a second name, so there's always nuance in here, right?
Yep.
So the nuance here is, if you're not turning in the non-household member declaration form, is this person actually not in the household, or are they in the household? So the nuance here is you might need to investigate this. But on the face of it, that would not necessarily be an incomplete issue unless you have reason to believe that person actually is in the household. So that's kind of the nuance there. So yeah, so with the utility bills, with the non-household member declaration form, I'm willing to say that, and I think the numbers also bear this out, right? That there's enough nuance there that maybe I made the wrong call in saying those aren't valid reasons. So yeah, I'm definitely I can see where the confusion was on that, and I can see where I might be just approaching it a different way, and that doesn't make the way that the people who answered those as being valid reasons, it doesn't invalidate that. So
yeah, so
yeah, I think there's nuance enough there where those two can be a, well, maybe.
I appreciate that, because until we get that non-household member declaration form, we don't know if they're in the household or not. So until we have determined all the household members, and what their income may be, we don't have an approved application.
That's certainly a valid argument. Yeah, I was, I'll be perfectly honest. When I came up with this quiz question, I was approaching it from the point of view of, in my scenario, I know that um, the imaginary person in my head who filled out the application truthfully. So in my head, I'm like, I know that it only has this many people in the household, and that extra name on the utility bill is not someone in the household. But I only know that because it's a scenario I made up in my head. You filling out the application don't know that. So thank you, Ingrid, for challenging me on that.
Well, my work here is done.
Linda.
I'm glad she challenged you on that, because my question to you was going to be like on the third question. So do you, instead of incompleting them, we are approving them without benefits, and that's going to be a nightmare, because if intake staff does not go in and delete those claims, because once you approve them, it automatically generates claims for us, and that's going to be a nightmare on the claimant. Also,
Well, I believe on the utility page, there is a way before you actually approve the application to put that the benefit for that utility is going to be denied. Is that accurate?
I don't think so, but I could be
Okay.
wrong.
There is on the
It
utility
depends
tab.
on
If you
what, sorry.
No, on the utility tab, there is a drop down. It's where you go to put in if they have like a credit. There's one that says like you can't, like, it can't be determined or something. So there's different options there. If you choose one of those, it won't generate the claim if you put accept, if you put approve.
Cool. Thank you for that, Justa.
Now, you just got to make sure you mark the correct reason on the utility tab for it to not create the claim. I've said that for many years with EAP Connect and rowing, and that's how I got taught, was to use the utility tab and use that drop-down box.
And
So
Amanda,
will you be getting, sorry, so will you be getting back with us on an answer to this?
sorry, to which in particular?
So the question number 3, if they don't turn in the non-household member declaration form, because like Ingrid said, we won't be able to determine household.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I kind of think that is a solid, that's a solid maybe, and because it was, like I said, I definitely had it as a no on this quiz, only because in my scenario, it was in my head and I knew what the answer was. If you have reason to believe that there may be another person in the household, and you feel like you need to wait for confirmation, you are 100% justified in requiring that in order to determine the household eligibility, because it does call into question. And if you have a question about that, then I would say that you 100% cannot confidently determine eligibility. So yeah, I think in that case, you're very much justified in doing that.
Can I jump? I'm really sorry. I did raise my hand, but I would like to say something before we move on with it. But I think we need to be consistent, because if I choose one client or one applicant and I say, okay, for you, I'm going to hold off with approving you because I don't believe you, but you, I'm going to approve because I believe you. Is that like really opens up the door for us to get in trouble, because somebody's going to go, oh, are you calling me a liar? So I think they're either incomplete until we have that. And because that form verifies that a person is not in the household, I think it should be an incomplete form because the client has to provide it.
I think that's a solid argument. So yeah, I would tend to agree with Ingrid and with Linda that if you see that name there without the non-household member declaration form, again, I was approaching it just from the point of view of the utility bill, but absolutely see where they're coming from. I think if you see that name there and you don't have that form where they are declaring under penalties of fraud and perjury that person is 100% not in the household, that's very fair. That you would need that in order to determine eligibility. So again, thank you guys. Thank you guys for challenging me on that and for um and for bringing it up, because that was absolutely me looking at things from my perspective and not approaching it as someone who is who is actually completing determining eligibility on an application for a household member that they don't know and that they didn't just create in their head. Amanda, I saw your hand up and then it went down. Did your question get answered?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, and so Kim got the trophy on this one, but as we've established, two of those probably should have been yeses. So yeah, this actually should have been a the scores are probably off on this, but all right. With that, let's take about 15 minutes here. Come back at about 2:55 Eastern, 1:55 Central, and then we will finish up day one at that point. All right. See everyone in 15 minutes. Okay. I realize that when we were having that last discussion, there was a lot going on in the chat. So I'm going to go through the stuff in the chat before we move forward here. All right. So the first thing I see that was not already addressed is when will the slides be available? I don't know when exactly they'll be sent out. I know that we will be going through and trying to correct anything that comes up as we go through this, where there might be some inconsistency in here. So we're going to get them out as soon as possible. We are going to be still dealing with with our OCS monitoring for the rest of the week. We managed to get today and tomorrow off for monitoring, but then we're going to be going right back into it. So it probably won't be until sometime next week, if I'm being completely honest and setting reasonable expectations here. But yeah, we'll try to get them out as soon as possible. Stacy is asking, are we allowed to ask for full 3 months of check stubs if the client is over income? Stacy, so if the client is saying that they feel that they are not actually over income, if you look only at the past 3 months, if they think that they would meet the eligibility, if you looked at the exact income received over the previous 13 weeks, I think that would be allowable as long as you're doing that for consistently for everybody who is being determined over income. So you just don't want to apply that selectively. But if you're willing to do that for everyone who falls into that, then yeah, I think that would be okay. Just you really want to think about how much burden you would be taking on with that. Lisa says that the income limits and percentages are different than what I show. Can I go back to that slide? Sure. Let me. Sorry, trying to find my navigation window here. Is this what you're looking for, Lisa?
I don't know if she can get on.
Yes, I
Oh, there you
was
go.
trying, I couldn't get the mute button to work. Yes, that is what I was looking for. We
Okay.
just recently had a conversation at work with weatherization, and somebody brought to our attention that the DOE website had different income limits than what we had. And so I was interested today to see what you showed, which is different than their website. So it doesn't surprise me that possibly they are wrong, but but they are different.
Give me 1 second. Let me double check. Let me double check to make sure this slide got updated properly, which I have to
Okay.
believe it did, but I'm just gonna.
And we could be looking at the wrong chart. I don't know. Sometimes it gets, I believe we are looking at the same chart. And I
Yeah.
think that I think I recall a conversation several months ago about this, that maybe we had internally, that it was not the same as what we showed.
Well,
But
and with it being DOE, you're certain that you're looking at a 60% SMI and not a 200% FPL?
it, well,
Hold on, I'm just pulling up because I know that we did update it in the manual, so I'm just going to the manual here.
the snippet that I have doesn't really say that. So perhaps it
Okay.
is, it just says poverty guidelines.
Okay, yeah, because I'm pretty sure DOE for weatherization it goes to I think the maximum is 200% of FPL.
It does. The chart that we were looking at showed all the percentages though. So we were just kind of
Gotcha.
comparing the 150 column to ours, and it just didn't match up. But again, they could just be wrong.
Yeah.
I trust you. I'm just throwing it out there that if somebody looks or somebody says doesn't match.
Well, no, I definitely want to be sure that that is correct because again, we've kind of been being pulled back and forth on a number of things, and we've been trying to get the manual updated and the slides updated, and I just want to be sure that we got everything matching. So while
Okay.
you're bringing this up, and trust me, we have time right now. So
Okay.
I've been burning through these slides. So policy.
Well, I'm going to step in. I've been, communicating with Lisa. So when I went to the website, it goes 50% to 75%. It never showed me a 60%. So that's why I was just like telling her about it, and that's why she pulled up the question.
Yeah.
And you can get back to us. I mean, if it's wrong, you can. Hopefully you're right.
Honestly, I'd rather be able to tell everyone at the same time right now. So
Okay.
let me just I've got the manual pulled up now. I'm just trying to Yeah, this is definitely matching what we updated to.
Okay, very good.
So yeah, we're good with these.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, let me get back to the chat. Regarding the check stub example, in order for the November 5th check stub to be acceptable, the client had to have been employed for 13 weeks at that point, correct? Laura, not necessarily. Now, if the applicant was not employed for the full 13 weeks prior to the application date, then you would need to know that just to be able to adjust to the divisor of for what uh, for how many weeks it should be looking for, and I think we'll be getting a little bit more into that this afternoon. But as long as it's within the past 91 days, it would be acceptable. It's just that if they haven't been working a full 13 weeks, not necessarily from the check date, although yes, from the check date, but really you're looking at the overall how many weeks. If did they start that job within the past 91 days of their application? But I think we'll get a little bit more into that in this next section before we break.
Okay, I hope so, because I'm confused.
Yeah. And Julie, you might have said this already, but the December 13th applicant submitted a pay stub dated 12/13. Can we use that, or do we need to subtract the income from that pay period and use that as it would have been from info from the previous pay stub? No, Julie, as long as if it's on or before the date of application, you're good. If it's dated after the application, that's when if it's the immediate pay stub after, you would be able to subtract. If it's more than one pay stub after, though, you would need to get something that's actually within 91 days prior to the application date. Yeah, sorry about that typo on the SSA benefit letter answer got there, everyone. Tashar is asking, wouldn't it be easier to request 3 months of income than to receive one check stub where it may show that they may have just started the job, than sending out an incomplete letter requesting more income from previous employer, or any agencies has any best practices to go about it? I see where you're coming from with that, Tashara, where if it's, something where they just started and they might have previous jobs. I think that's something we just need to tackle on a case by case rather basis. But we can definitely, if anyone has any best practices, definitely be happy to talk about that. Maybe on the next network call. Julie saying, I feel like the incomplete will be further complicated as we still need to send an incomplete letter for apps that are in progress. Like in the case of where a bill has a second name and we need info, that will require a letter. So yeah, Julie, I'm assuming that is referring back to kind of the ones that we went through on that quiz where
It does,
yeah.
but it also is any of those that are basically incomplete, but that we are now going to be calling them in progress. Well, for some examples from that, but not all. It's nuanced, incomplete and in progress, but it could create issues and a little bit of confusion in some cases.
Sure. Yeah, and I think this is something that we're still kind of trying to we're still trying to I think feel out where the sweet spot is in terms of making this useful. I think we're closer than we were, but it's definitely still a work in progress. But yeah, happy to hear feedback for sure, especially as things are implemented. Um, Since claims are auto-added once the household says approved, this opens up the possibility for lots of errors to have to forget to delete the claims. And yeah, we kind of talked about that. Brad always said that about the eConnect. Mary, basically the client submitted all documents to determine program eligibility, so the application wouldn't be incomplete. It would be in progress to gain further information documents. That was the intention there, yeah. Okay, Amanda, I see where that confusion was and with the hand. Okay. Ingrid and Linda, you're welcome. Tashar is asking, how do you ask for 3 months of income without asking for 3 months of income? So I think hopefully, Tashara, this next question will, or this next section that we're going over this afternoon will address that for you. Oh, unless that was related to Stacy's question, in which case, yeah, so Ingrid clarifies in the past, we asked for the 3 months of income if they appealed their denial for being over income. So yeah, it was kind of if they if the estimate we come through with the calculation tool, which can be skewed if the applicant, basically the cases where that tool would be skewed is, I think, are pretty limited to cases where either the applicant worked a large amount of overtime earlier in the year, but not within the past 13 weeks, or had their hours cut and worked significantly less in the past 13 weeks than they had previously in the year, or cases where they had a significant, maybe like a bonus earlier in the year, but was outside that immediate 13 weeks. Those are the cases where I think it could, where someone might actually be over income using the tool, but then if you look at the actual 13 weeks worth of pay stubs, they wouldn't be. But I think in most cases, the math and the logic on the 13-week tool is sound. It's just not able to account for details like that you wouldn't necessarily see in a year-to-date aggregate. Okay, and Julie posted a chart for the SMI table. So thank you for that, Julie. Cool. All right, that brings us up to date. I did stop sharing the presentation to make sure that the Slido loads correctly. So I am going to go back to here and go back into presentation mode. All right, we are in the home stretch. Make sure my screen is sharing. All right, everyone should be seeing that, and I am going to move us ahead. So now we're going to talk about the actual sources of income and how to calculate them. Our actual sources of income that we're counting remain unchanged from the past at least 5 or 6 years here. Once again, they are wages, salary, tips, bonuses, commissions, self-employment, profits from a business, military allotments, excluding the combat zone pay, disability payments from insurance, Social Security, SSI, railroad retirement, railroad disability benefits, black lung survivor benefits, income from rental property, life insurance payments, dividends, interest, gambling winnings, awards, pensions, annuities, retirement plans, royalties, strike benefits, unemployment benefits, veteran benefits, regular life insurance payments, workers' compensation, alimony payments, irregular income, odd jobs, and household support. always my favorite slide to go down. So the easiest income that we have to calculate is our fixed income source. So these are largely, a lot of these are going to be fixed income sources, or a lot of them rather are going to be federally administered benefits. So those might be Social Security, SSDI, SSI, Railroad Retirement, and VA benefits. Whenever you have these fixed income sources, you're just going to take that current monthly amount, multiply it by 3 in order to determine eligibility income. The only possible exception for that will be in January or February of 2026. If during those months an applicant presents a letter and that letter shows both the 2025 monthly benefit as well as the 2026 benefit with a COLA increase, then the intake should take care to apply the COLA rate only to the appropriate months. If, however, someone applies in January or February 2026 and they provide a letter that either has only the 2025 benefit or only the 2026 benefit, we are not going to worry about the COLA. The COLA typically is so insignificant, and people usually are not that close to the line with these fixed income sources. That COLA amount ends up being fairly inconsequential. And frankly, I'm willing to take the gamble on, on those one in however many cases where it might actually change the bracket that they're in, or potentially knock them out of eligibility. Honestly, if it's happening so rarely. I think that's not worth the extra burden and the extra staff time needed in order to correct it. So as long as what they're giving you isn't like egregiously out of date, as long as it's not like a year out of date, just use what they give you. And if it's January or February and what they give you either has the COLA increase or doesn't have the COLA increase, it doesn't matter. Just use it, multiply it by 3. But like I said, if they give it to you and it has both figures, since you have it all in front of you, just apply the correct amount to the correct month. The other thing to remember with federally administered fixed income sources is this is the only income source where intake is going to use the net amount after any withholdings and deductions have been used or have been taken out, rather than using the gross amount. With fixed income, we also have some non-federally administered fixed income benefits. So those are going to be your pensions, your recurring payment retirement plans, etc. In that case, you are going to take the current monthly amount, multiply it by 3 in order to determine the eligibility income. Our state plan does state that we are going to consider the gross amount of this income. Therefore, the intake should be requesting a copy of the benefit award letter or a physical check stub that shows the full benefit amount prior to any withholdings or deductions, rather than a bank statement showing the net amount. Hopefully the applicant is able to provide that. If they're not able to provide that, I think we should just leave a note in the case file to explain that. We certainly want to adhere to our state plan, but we also don't want to put the applicant out with a whole lot of extra burden over, again, something that with these fixed income sources, we know that no one's living comfortably on these fixed income sources, right? So I mean, I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker in terms of eligibility. So let's try to get the best documentation that we can, but let's not stress out. Let's not stress ourselves or our applicants out too much over it. Next up, we are going to talk about unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits may be documented via a last known employer report obtained from the Department of Workforce Development, or via an applicant's printout of their benefit status from the uplink interface. If the applicant provides an uplink report, we will require the full report with payment details. I know a lot of people do submit that screenshot, just kind of showing an update of or an overview of their status. That is not going to show the payment details. It is not sufficient, unfortunately. So the full state provided benefit must be considered along with any federal supplemental benefits. I don't foresee under the current administration there being any additional federal supplemental benefits being offered to anybody. But we'll see what happens over the next year, right? The amount for each week may be calculated by considering gross paid plus the total withholdings. The process date shall be considered as opposed to the claim date, because what we're interested in is when the payment was actually being provided to the applicant, not what week that payment was for. We want to see what the applicant was actually receiving over the past 13 weeks. So if they were in a waiting period and then they receive a few weeks worth of pay, if it was within that 13 weeks, that is fair game. Because I'm gonna head off the question from CoAction that I know that I traditionally field each year. I have not been able to establish any kind of relationship with the equivalent of the Department of Workforce Development for Illinois. So for anyone who was working in Illinois and is receiving in Illinois unemployment benefits, I'm afraid that we are not going to be able to request those, at least for the time being, and we're going to have to continue to ask them to provide their own documentation of their claim history. Hopefully one day I'll have a different answer for that. Self-employment. So self-employment can include profit or loss from a business, rental income, royalties, partnerships, S corporations, estates, trusts, farming, and or church employee income. Because of the nature of self-employment income and how it is reported, we do calculate based on the most recent complete tax year. The income for that full most recent complete tax year is going to be divided by 4 in order to determine the representative 3-month income. And if the applicant's self-employment income was not present during that most recent complete tax year, then intake should attempt to obtain 3 months worth of receipts accompanied by the income verification affidavit, just to back up what they are saying. If the applicant does not file taxes for the self-employment income, then it will not be considered self-employment. It will be considered irregular or incidental income, and it will be documented by way of an IVA. So when someone has self-employment income, we are going to require that full most recent 1040 tax return that was filed with the IRS. And when we say full, we do mean full. It needs to include any of the applicable self-employment schedules. Anyone who actually filed for self-employment should have at least 2 schedules there. They should have Schedule 1, which is going to be the additional income and adjustments to income. And the purpose of Schedule 1 is basically to summarize what kind of income is included in the return. And it really indicates what other schedules are going to be there and should be considered. Now, there are more schedules than just this, but the only ones that we are going to be interested in are schedules C, E, F, or SE. So Schedule C is a profit or loss from business. As of the last time I checked, we were using line 5 gross profit. I am going to double check the 2024 tax returns to make sure that it was still line 5, although I'm 99% positive that I did actually check that, but I don't know. I've slept a few times and the world is burning, so I don't even remember what I did 2 days ago right now. I'm also once the 2025 tax forms are available, I'm going to double check to make sure that this is all still going to be true, that it hasn't changed radically. If it does change radically, I'm going to issue some sort of policy guidance on it because this is in our manual as what we are using. So I want to be sure that we are covering all our bases and following what's in the policy. So yeah, so as of right now, Schedule C, we're going to use line 5, which is gross profit. Schedule E is supplemental income and loss, and it reports a number of different incomes that are relevant to our application. So depending on what kind of income that household has, if they are renting out property, we are going to use line 3. If they're receiving royalties from any intellectual property, we're going to be using line 4. If they have a partnership or an S corporation, we're going to be using Schedule E, line 32, which is the total partnership and S corporation income or loss. If they have an estate or a trust, we will be using line 37 of Schedule E. For real estate mortgage investment conduits, or REMICs, we would be using line 39. And for farm rental income or loss, we'd be using line 40 of that Schedule E. Schedule E is the only one where we have multiple places to look. Schedule F is profit or loss from farming. For that Schedule F, we're only going to be interested in line 9, which is their gross income. And for Schedule SE, self-employment tax, we're only going to be using that for church employee income, so it's extremely limited use for us. And we're going to be using line 5A in the long form. If they use a short form Schedule SE, then we wouldn't have anything to report on that. Just want to reiterate, we are using line 5, not line 7 on that Schedule C. So line 5 is gross profit, line 7 is gross income. So the difference between 5 and 7 is the gross income includes things like some tax credits and things that we actually do have excluded as income. We don't have any tax credits that we count as income, so we want to be sure that we're excluding that tax credit income from our final determinations. That's why we're using line 5. Also remember, I know at this point it's been several years since we've done this, but it always bears reminding, I think, for people who have been around for many years. We no longer add the value of a utility deduction into the income, regardless of whether the business is run out of the home address. For newer people, just for your benefit, self-employment used to be a little bit of a more complicated calculation, because we would actually, if they took the utility benefit and the business was based out of their home, we would actually add that utility deduction back into their income. We've stopped doing that. Basically we saw it as being inequitable, since we were not allowing them to, as it was, we weren't taking into account any of the deductions anyway. So adding back in a deduction that we weren't counting to begin with seemed inequitable. And then if the applicant's self-employment income is 0, or if it shows a loss, so you're not going to enter a negative amount if it shows a loss, you're just going to enter it as a 0. And the other part is we don't have to have them fill out an IVA as a 0 income applicant, even if they show 0 or a loss. I mean, we know that the way accounting goes, especially with taxes, there are so many deductions that they're able to take and credits and the cost of goods sold, which gets deducted, where it may on paper look like 0, but it's not actually a 0. So we're not gonna hold them to the to having to do an IVA and prove the 0 and all that. We're just gonna take it, put it as a 0, and move on. Right. On to earned income, employment, salary, and wages. First, we do want to remind everyone, please do not use a DWD, last known employer report, to identify or determine employment history or income. We are going to just take what the applicant provides to us. So employment income may be calculated using a pay stub or a pay statement, a request for earnings statement, or if neither of these methods are feasible, an income verification affidavit, with the caveat here that we are going to be combining that request for earnings statement and income verification affidavit. And once we are finished with that form, we will be providing further guidance on how it works. Reminder that W-2s are in general usually not going to reflect the time period that we are needing for the eligibility determination. We are looking at just the last 13 weeks prior to the date of application. Therefore, W-2s are generally not considered an acceptable document for employment income in most cases. If the pay stub documentation discloses both year-to-date gross wages and year-to-date federal taxable gross wages, intake is every time going to use the federal taxable gross. And federal taxable gross wages, just so you're aware, are sometimes also notated as FIT, F-I-T, for federal income taxable gross on some pay stubs. However, if the pay stub documentation does not specify federal taxable gross, intake is going to just use the gross amount. We don't want intake to calculate the deductions on their own and subtract them in order to try to determine the federal taxable gross wages. We just want to go with what's on the documentation in front of them. And just as a reminder for the remainder of this presentation, anytime I say gross wages or year-to-date gross wages, it shall be understood to imply that if federal taxable is available, that's going to be the default. So this is my other favorite part of this presentation every year. So several years ago, we did introduce the Excel workbooks in order to determine, in order to calculate the eligibility pay for everyone. I still like to train on how exactly that calculation is being made. Just so everyone understands why we created the tool, just how much heavy lifting that tool is doing, and also to give you something to refer back to. I know I've had a number of appeals come to me this year, and trying to explain to an applicant how we came to a calculation, how we came to a determination, and why the determination was what it was. I do think it's important that at your agency that you are aware of what kind of calculation is being made and why that number came out looking the way it did. So with that being said, even though you are not going to use this in practical real world applications, I do want everyone to understand what's going on in the background on that tool. So when we calculate income using the 13-week method, the most recent available pay stub is preferred, but as a reminder, we may use any pay stub provided that as long as it does fall within that 13-week or 91-day eligibility window. First thing we need to do is note whether the pay period represents 1 week or 2 weeks. We then determine the week number out of 52 weeks that's represented by the pay date of the check. Now, for our purposes, we do need to be sure that we are counting weeks in a consistent way. So for our purposes, and I have the tool programmed this way, a week is counted each time a Friday falls, because the majority of our applicants I have found tend to have their paydays on Fridays. Now, when you count those weeks, if the pay period is 2 weeks, and you found that when you count the number of weeks, you're coming up with an odd number, you're going to need that to round that value up. So if you find that that pay stub is 33 weeks, that's going to become 34. If the applicant started working after the beginning of the calendar year, try to determine when their first pay occurred. Determine the week number of this pay, subtract 1, and then subtract it from the pay date week number. So let's say in that previous scenario, you determine that this is pay week 34. But they didn't start working. They started working after January. Let's say they started working February 4th. Their first pay was February 4th. I have no idea if February 4th was a Friday. February 4th was not Friday. Their first pay was February 7th. Okay. So we're going to count how many weeks for February 7th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So February 7th was the 6th pay. So we are going to sorry, 34, and we said they went 6 pays without. We would subtract 1, but then that 1 gets added back because it's a 2-week pay period. So it's still going to end up being a 6. If it were a single week pay, we would want to subtract that 1, so we're not counting the current week. So we said 34. We said that they went 6 weeks without a pay. We're going to come up with 28 for that. We are then going to divide that year-to-date gross or year-to-date federal taxable gross by the number of weeks represented on the paycheck, which we're saying if they worked since January 1st would be 34. If their first pay was February 7th, would be 28. This will give you the representative mean weekly amount. We then multiply that representative weekly amount by 13. This will give you the eligibility determination period income. Caveat on that 13 though. If the applicant is no longer working at the job, then what you will need to do is determine how many weeks have passed since last pay and adjust the multiplier accordingly. For example, if the last pay was 4 weeks prior to the application date, then instead of 13, we would multiply that representative weekly amount by 9 and then count 4 weeks as 0 income. Similarly, if the applicant has not been working at this job the entire past 13 weeks, you will need to determine how many potential pay weeks were not included and subtract that from 13 to determine the multiplier. So, the real world example here. Ash Williams worked as a sales clerk at S-Mart. Ash applies for EAP on April 15th, 2025. Ash provides a pay stub from March 8th, 2025. He further explains that that was his last pay as he no longer works at S-Mart. Ash's pay stub shows that his year-to-date gross was $6,000 and that he was paid according to a 1-week pay period. So, in this scenario, March 8th is the 10th week of the year. He said that he was paid $6,000. So we're going to take that 6,000, divide by 10 weeks. He received a mean weekly income of $600. Since Ash has not received pay since March 8th, we now must determine how many weeks to offset that 13-week multiplier by. Because this pay was weekly, we must account for 5 weeks. And those 5 weeks will be March 15th, March 22nd, March 29th, April 5th, and April 12th. So instead of 13, we are going to subtract 5, and we are only going to count 8 weeks at that $600 a week. So during the income eligibility period, Ash received $4,800 in income from S-Mart. We would then need an IVA for the month of April to show how Ash met his living expenses without income. The IVA does not need to address March because Ash did receive income on March 8th. So it's not an entire month of 0 income. Clear as mud? So basically, we took what is a really unwieldy and complicated series of interrelated calculations, and we have Excel doing that for you all in the background. And I think there are 8 pieces of data entry needed essentially in order to run all of that I just talked through. So we have not yet proactively tested the 2026 worksheets, but we will be testing the 2026 worksheets. And I trust that they will work as intended. If they don't work as intended, I will figure out what is wrong with them and I will correct them. Please, please, please make sure everyone is trained on these. So this is what that looks like. So as you can see here, intake is entering the household member name, the employer. That's just for your reference so that you know what job you're looking at. Same thing with the application key. In order to calculate, all they're needing to add in is the application date, the check date. Yes or no, did they work from January 1st of the calendar year? How long was the pay period? 1 or 2 weeks. If they did not work from January 1st, what was the date of the first pay? What's the year-to-date gross income? And are they still working? It will take all that information and it will spit out exactly what we came up with during that needlessly complicated series of slides that we had. Okay, next couple slides, the standard asterisk that we are going to be coming up with a new form that combines a request for earnings statement and the IVA will apply. So the request for earnings statement is a form that may be used to get wage information directly from an employer when an applicant is unable to provide pay stubs. It may also be helpful for applicants who are involved in gig work and have no concise report of aggregate earnings. Because of the potential for falsification of this form, LSPs must obtain the applicant's release signature on the form and the employer's contact information, and then contact the employer directly in order to send them the form. And the IVA, so the IVA allows the applicants to declare any irregular or incidental income, including odd jobs. Declare zero income for any month or all 3 months of the eligibility determination period. Declare employment income for which they have no other documentation. And this is used if documented attempts to obtain pay stubs or requests for earnings statement have failed. Remember, when using an IVA, we are required to use gross income for employment, not net. Best practice is to verify an applicant's pay rate and average number of hours per week and document this. Make sure that it adds up, and ensure that the figures provided on the IVA jibe with those with that pay rate and average number of hours worked per week. Unfortunately, because I have not completed that form yet, I do not have updated examples to show you, but we will get those out as soon as we have that form finalized. With the IVA, remember that if an applicant declares zero income for any of the prior 3 months, that applicant must complete Section 2. They must explain how they have met financial needs during those months that they had zero income. And if they decline to answer those questions, then the IVA is considered incomplete and invalid. Also remember that if an applicant discloses in Section 2 that they have received cash payments made directly to them for household support, then that does need to be counted as household income. All right, we have a couple of Slido quizzes here. I believe we have 2 questions here. I hope they are not going to be as controversial as the last one was. So let's jump in. So what business expenses are allowed to be excluded from self-employment? Utilities, advertising and marketing, vehicle expenses, cost of goods sold, or none. And it's looking like I set this up incorrectly. It's looking like I accidentally set up as a poll instead of as a quiz. So I am sorry about that. And it looks like with it being a poll, it also didn't have the timer on it. Give it a few more seconds. I still see some answers coming in. We still have about 18 people that haven't answered. Okay. And 71% of you said none, which is the correct answer. So good job. Yeah, we're not going to subtract any of the business expenses from self-employment. And second one, hopefully is set up as a quiz. Yeah, this is set up as a quiz. So this one's going to be correct. All right, and an applicant's pay stub does not list federal taxable gross. When using year-to-date gross, the household is over income. What can the intake subtract in order to calculate the federal taxable gross? Can they subtract withheld federal taxes, withheld state and local taxes, the 401k or 403b contributions, health insurance premiums, child support withheld, or nothing? All right, so we had 46% say nothing. We had 50% say child support withheld. 2% each say health insurance premiums and 401k, 403b contributions. And this was another one where, as I'm looking at the answers, I realized that the child support withheld is one I should not have put in there because that should have been, well, I'm trying to think of what policy changes we have coming in 2026. I know we talked about possibly not withholding that child support anymore. Yeah, so I know our current policy does actually subtract child support right away. So that actually would not be part of that federal taxable gross calculation, but technically that should have been subtracted anyway. So yeah, this is another one where I did not think it. I was thinking of it very narrowly in terms of what my scenario was, and not with the and not thinking of the whole picture. So I will also give it to everyone who said child support withheld. So fantastic job, everyone. Right. We are almost done here. Gonna go to the chat. I see that the chat has been busy. All right, so Tashara is asking, I see that some people are confirming for the Schedule C line 5, so thank you. Oh, and Brad, thank you for confirming on the 2025 form. I did not know those were available already. Perfect. So Tashara is asking, for self-employment, if someone says that they didn't file taxes because they didn't make that much, how or what are we to request? I could be wrong on this. I thought if they have a registered business, regardless of whether they have a profit or loss, regardless of whether they didn't make much or whether they had a loss, I thought they had to file those taxes. I mean, if they say they didn't file taxes, then we need to kind of follow the guidance of how we do it if they did not have that self-employment on their previous year taxes. So that would be getting an IVA and trying to get the receipts from them to back up the IVA. But you can partner with us if you come into that. I would probably question if it is actually self-employment, if it's actually a registered business. But yeah, we can work with you individually on that if you come to that. Ingrid prefers the income calculator. I guess that's the onboard on EAP Connect, Ingrid. Very good.
No, I meant like compared to
Oh.
having to calculate however many
Oh.
weeks we have to use. So I'm
Oh,
okay
yeah.
with either one of the income calculators, but not that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a complex it's definitely a it's a process. All right, and Laura is asking if clients are paid bi-monthly. Laura, that's on my list to try to get to try to make that work. It seems like it should be really easy, but for whatever reason, it's not. I haven't quite been able to make it work. I'll probably have to come up with an entirely new worksheet at that point. And I know getting that into EAP Connect is going to be a bear. I think EIS will be able to do that once we're fully switched over to EIS. So I will. I'm gonna try to work up something. I'm gonna stop short of promising that because I am well aware of what my limits are as far as my capacity, but I'm going to try. But if not, then next year, hopefully. Julie says each year there are issues when we start the new year. Neither the Excel sheet nor the EC calculator seem to be able to correctly figure income for pay stubs received in the first few or more weeks in the new year, and it causes confusion and likely incorrect calculations. I would, I would push back just a little bit on that, Julie. I don't think it has anything to do necessarily with the year. I think it has everything to do with um, when that first pay falls. So I think when you have that issue, it's at least on the one that I'm responsible for, the Excel sheet. I'm not going to speak for rowing and their programming, but on my end, I can tell you that I did determine that when that issue happens, it's typically because it's typically when it's a very early application, and what it has to do with not so much with the year, but just with the way it counts the weeks. And if that first pay falls before that first Friday. So because the calculator needs a day on which to count the week in order to be consistent, and we said Friday. Let's say Friday falls on January 6th, then that means anyone who brings in a pay between January 1st and January 5, it's going to count it as 0 weeks. So I have determined that's the thing.
I think what else it is, it's just kind of a really not very accurate representation because it's got so little income on it. So, I've kind of always encouraged, if we can, to actually get the last pay stub from December for a better representation, because you'll get two entirely different amounts using the, one received in the third or fourth week of January than you do from the one at the end of December. So it's kind of a little bit wonky for a few different reasons, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair characterization. And I think especially right for any of our applicants who are working retail. If you're getting that very early January pay stub and they're working retail and they were working retail, say around Christmas time, they're probably going to see a lot more hours and potentially some overtime that they wouldn't typically see during the rest of the year. So I think that that's very fair. Yeah, but just so thanks for mentioning that, and that is I do want to just remind everyone on the call, like to encourage to get that that kind of end of the previous year pay sub instead of that January pay sub, which is with if you only have 1 or 2 weeks on there, if it's an out of proportion pay stub, it is going to largely skew what your calculation is. So I think what Julie says about the end of December pay stub being more representative of the norm 100% carries water. And I think that's fair to encourage them to turn that in. But just to continue my previous thought, I do want to also clarify. I think the one time where we should be changing dates for a pay stub, and I want to go out on a limb and say this is going to be the only time I'm ever going to advocate for changing dates for the pay stub, is if you are doing one of those early January, first pay stub of the year, and that pay date is before the first Friday. What I am going to instruct everyone to do is when you're actually entering it into the tool, you're going to make that pay date that first Friday instead of what the actual date was, only if that date was before the first Friday. So hopefully that makes sense. But happy to revisit it, once we hit January, if anyone has any questions about that. And yeah, Julie, once again, thank you for providing that context because you're 100% spot on with that. Tashara, if a client provides check stubs with no name of the employer, but everything else needed to complete the Excel sheet is there, can we continue to calculate income? Yeah, the only reason I have the pay stub on there or the employer name on there is so that especially if it's a person who is working multiple jobs, or if it's a household where you're making multiple calculations because of multiple jobs in the household, it helps you and our monitor to know which ones we're looking at. So if you have it, it's helpful to enter that just so we have that context. But if you don't have it there, it's not like we're required to know who the employer is in order to determine eligibility. That's just there for context and for ease of monitoring and review. And Delilah, for those who receive any type of Social Security income and they apply in October, November, December, can we use a 1099 if it's provided? If they apply in October, November, December, most likely they should not have a 1099 yet. If it's in January, they might have the 1099. I know we've been trying to move away from using those documents. I think with the fixed income, it's a little bit different. It's it's obviously different than W-2 because it is going to be a fixed income amount. Delilah, I am going to have to get back to everyone on that. I want to have an internal discussion with the team, see how they feel. I don't want to make this call by myself. But we are going to, my team is making notes of everything that we say we're going to follow up on. So I trust that they're going to grab this also and get that in there so that we can talk about it probably at the next, either at a follow-up Q&A session from this or on the next network call. Tashara is asking if multiple IVAs are submitted, can they all be combined to make one complete one? Tashara, can you elaborate on that? I'm just trying to figure out where there would be multiple IVAs for one person.
Hey, Tom, it's Joni. Okay, so the first time they send it in, they send in an IVA and they maybe have, in section 2, they maybe have boxes 1 and 2 completed. Then it's sent back because we need more information on them. So they send it back and maybe they have boxes 1, 3, and 4 completed. Can we combine those two to make one complete IVA? Because all
I
the
think,
information is there.
yeah. I think possibly. I think the other thing that we might be able to do, which might be easier, I don't know if this would be easier for staff in the long run. It would probably be easier for the applicant, is if it's clear they made an effort to complete it properly, but they just missed something, you might be able to just contact them by phone and just verify, like, hey, this one piece of information is missing. Can you just provide that verbally and you document that conversation, and that would cover you.
Okay, thank you for that, but
Yeah.
let's say they provided a phone number, because this happens a lot, and then their phone number changes. We cannot reach them. Then can we go ahead and do it with the proper notes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I'm having difficulty wrapping my head around a little bit. But ultimately, however we can get there, I think we just need to, as long as we are talking about the same time period each time, as long as we have
Yes.
their signatures on everything, I think it would be okay.
Okay, with a note in the notes section.
Yeah, that's where my head is right now on it. I would probably have to see the actual, see what's being presented in order to say 100%, but that's kind of where my head is on it. We want to get to a complete information. It's better for everyone involved if they can just do it all at once, but we also don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good here. So that's kind of where my head is on it.
Thank you.
Yep. And yeah, so Shania says disclaimer that identifies week 1, we clear up issue for new pay stubs. Yeah, I can be sure to in this year's version, I can clarify, with it always counting from a Friday, I can put in the instructions like, for 2026, the first Friday is X date. I closed my calendar already. And for any pay stub before that, move it forward to that date. Happy to do that, Shania. Thank you. And Brad is asking if the payday is being changed on the Excel income tool, then it must be case noted, correct? Yeah, if you could, that would be helpful, I think, in terms of monitoring, Brad. So, good question. All right. We just have a few more slides here, so let's power through to the end. So some tips and reminders for income eligibility and determination. So we have some income documents tips. When looking at a bank statement, recurring payments are often marked PPD. So if you see that PPD next to it, you know that that's going to be recurring on some kind of regular basis. Refunds, whether they are for store returns or bank fees, are not going to be counted as income. Applicants may not redact or alter income documentation. And individual income amounts under $1 do not need to be counted. For instance, monthly or quarterly interest earned on most applicants' bank accounts can most likely be disregarded. It may help to chart the eligibility determination period for a particular file based on the application date and visualize the months that are being counted, especially if the household members have worked multiple jobs. Remember that entering the application date onto the 13-week spreadsheet will calculate and display the income eligibility window for you. Simplify where you can. If you have a current pay stub where the year-to-date gross is equal to the current pay, you know that is a first pay stub at a new job. In that case, there's not going to be a need to do any math. Just count all that income. If you know that somebody started a job within the past 3 months, document that, and then you can just count the entire pay stub as income, as it could not possibly count for more than 3 months. Do remember, however, you may need an AVA for the period of time prior to when the household member started receiving this income if it represents a month without income. And also remember that if the pay stub is 1 pay period or more prior to the application date, you will need to account for pay received after the pay stub. General tips and reminders. In general, the only reason to request a last known employer report from the DWD is for an applicant claiming unemployment income. I did say in general there may be other isolated reasons that you may want to request that, but as far as routine goes, you only want to do that for if they are receiving unemployment. If you have reason to believe an applicant is being deceptive, non-compliant, fraudulent, then you do have the right to request it as part of your investigation. If there are unexplained deposits on a bank statement, an intake worker should ask the applicant about them. If they are in the documentation, remember they are always fair game and they're subject to monitoring. That being said, we're not detectives. I'm not a detective. I'm pretty sure none of you are detectives. We do need to be cognizant of fraud, waste, and abuse. It is a requirement that we act as good stewards of public funds. But also remember that most clients are really not trying to defraud the government. Most noncompliance stems either from applicants not understanding the requirements or not realizing that they need to claim certain pieces of income. Be open, be transparent, be communicative, be ready to educate, and most importantly, be ready to give second chances. So income calculation, I know a lot of you have heard me say this so many times. It's a little bit of an art, a little bit of a science. I think in the past we've maybe erred a little bit on the side of having it be an art. We're trying to get scales back into science and take away some of that ambiguity, both for intake's sake as well as for the applicant's sake. And also, as a rule, income calculation is only as good as the supporting documentation used for determination, and that's why we are asking at the current time anyway for less preferred forms of documentation to be noted. All right. I forget if we were supposed to go to 4 or 4:30. It is 4:10, so we're either a little bit late or a little bit more early. Got through a lot of material today. Had some wonderful, wonderful questions, some good conversations. Sorry, Ingrid. I guess I slowed us down a little bit too much. Anyway, since we are a little bit late, as Ingrid is joyous to point out, I am going to let everyone go now. We will meet at the same time tomorrow. We actually have less material tomorrow, so but I think I might have to stretch a little bit. I might have to stretch some of it out a little bit more because we're going to be going over a little bit more, I think, new concepts. So hopefully we'll be able to end a little bit early tomorrow to make up for today. But yeah, I want to thank everyone for their attention and participation, and especially for the great questions and discussion today. See everyone tomorrow. Thanks.
Yeah, wait.
You know, Henry, right?
Hey,